All right, let's get going. Let's get started. All right, team. Let me introduce you to my good friend, Mr. Kalen Huntress. Kalen and I go back way back, many years. I think it was like 2015, 2016. I met you, Kalen. Back when Young Architect was just a tiny little thing. And me and Kalen have kept in touch through the years. This guy he's a jack of all trades, but most importantly, he's a marketing wizard. Kalen knows so much about how to put all these pieces together and systems, and he's really helped me grow Young Architect. And in some ways, what's kind of funny, it kind of all comes full circle, Kalen, because I think talking with you and working with you, actually, you started the Young Architect Academy with me and helped me kind of get that launched off the ground. And I think you helped dial it all in from day one. And now you're speaking at our event. So guys, I'm super excited to have Kalen here. He's called in from New Zealand. He lives in New Zealand. And his presentation is called Designing Productivity, Proven Systems to Free Your Focus for What Matters Most. I'll let you take it away, Kalen.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's really great to see you. And thanks everybody for spending some time with me today. I'd love to know, what time is it where you are? Go ahead and type it in the chat box and let me know, what time is it for you right now? Great, some 2 p.m., some noons, lots of 3 p.m.s, great. Great, yeah, for me right now, it's 9 in the morning on Saturday. Because I live in New Zealand, I'm across the international date line. I live in tomorrow. Spoiler alert, the world's still here. So I'm gonna ask you another question that I'd like you to answer in the chat box, but I don't want you to hit enter yet. We're all gonna hit enter together, and I'd like you to answer this question. What's the hardest thing about productivity? I'll give you 30 seconds to write your answer to this question, but don't hit enter yet. Okay, let's all hit enter now. Great, eliminating distractions, focus, consistency, great, great. Yeah, we're gonna be covering a lot of this today because we all have the same 24 hours in a day, right? But some of us end up really successful in our careers while others flounder for half their life. And quite often the difference between someone who's a success and someone who's a failure is their ability to manage their time. We all get that same 24 hours in a day, but some of us can get more out of it. And the reason is because they've developed a system for productivity. I'm going to go through some of the current popular systems of productivity with you today, how they work and what they're about, because what I want to do is I want to introduce you to a system today that could upgrade your entire life. These are the 3 systems we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about first things first, getting things done, and the 4 disciplines of execution. And each one of these is also the title of a book. So if you want to go deeper on any of these systems, these are the rabbit holes that you can go into if you want further study. But even if none of these systems resonate with you, I want you to find some tools that you can pilfer for your own toolbox. Because the system that's going to work the best for you is not the same as the system that works for me or for Mike or for Sean or for Shanita. Everybody's got their own toolbox. And finding what the right tools are for you is the work of productivity. So I'm going to throw a lot of information at you today, and I want you to take notes. So make sure you have a notebook and a pen nearby, and write down any ideas that come to you that you want to follow up with later. Anything that's actionable, put a star next to it. So that way, when you review your notes, you can see at a glance anything that's actionable in your notes. But if you prefer to take notes digitally, do it on Twitter or LinkedIn or in the Facebook group, somewhere that you can use the hashtag for the conference, YAWS 2021. And if you can spell my name, you can tag me in it. It's in the corner of the slides. But just be sure to use that hashtag. And I encourage you to leave this presentation and go to Twitter or go to your favorite social media profile and share ideas over there. If you want to screenshot some of the quotes or the visual models that we're going to go over, feel free to do that and share them. And if you want the slides, I can give them to you at the end of the presentation. Now, when you set up a simple system to manage your tasks and your time, you can make the most of the time you've got. You could stop wasting your time on doing the wrong things, and you'll find that the volume and the impact of your work is increased. The problem with learning productivity is it's an elective. You have to learn it in addition to everything else that you're already studying. They don't really teach productivity classes in university, but if you study productivity, it magnifies everything else that you do. I first learned productivity when I was 29 years old and somebody handed me this book. They handed me Getting Things Done because I was tired and broke and exhausted and unsuccessful. I had a mortgage and a baby and I was totally underwater. And they said, you need to read this book. And it was the last thing I wanted to do. I had these huge to-do lists that were not getting done. I had all these competing priorities, and then I had to study this extracurricular book. But I'm so glad that I did. When I was 29, this was me at 29, and I was selling car insurance at the time. And in case you're wondering, it is as boring as it sounds. But what I liked so much about that job is that I was compensated on how productive I could do my job. If I made more sales, I made more money. And so I found the time to read this book and to implement a system of productivity. And it turned my whole life around. Instead of having a desk full of papers, I found a way to harness the chaos and make sense of it. I had time to go to the gym in the morning. I stopped working long hours so I could spend more time with my family. My income increased. I was no longer worried about, am I working on the right thing here? I knew that the next thing in front of me was the right thing to do because my systems cleared my desk. This was the biggest transformation for me, is that instead of being confronted with a huge desk of miscellaneous, I had a small list of things to work on that day. And that clarity made me better at everything else that I did. What this taught me was how to separate thinking and doing. Thinking and doing are two fundamentally different mindsets. When you have on your thinking cap, you can do a lot of thinking tasks. And when you have on your doing cap, you can go from execution to execution. It's when you try and switch those caps that you get into trouble. It's like the difference between a plane that's at 30,000 feet and a plane that's at ground level. When a plane's at 30,000 feet, there's a lot of different things it can do. It can see the entire landscape. It can make large decisions quickly and get to a different point in the geography. But at ground level, that's where a plane can take on passengers and let them off. Planes can't do that when they're up in the air. The things that a plane can do at 30,000 feet are not the same as ground level, and there's a switching cost. You have to take off the plane or land the plane, and that takes a lot of time. And it's the same with your two caps. If you're in thinking mode and you suddenly say, oh, let me just take care of this real quick, and you go into doing mode, your mindset shifts and it makes you inefficient for a little while. And then while you're in execution, if you say, wait, is this really what I should be doing right now? And you put on your thinking cap, you stop doing. You lose efficiency. As Charlie Gilkey says, use your creativity and mental horsepower to figure out how to do the work, not what the work is. Steve Jobs famously wore the same outfit for half of his career because he could separate his thinking time from his doing time. When he got up in the morning, he didn't have to think about what to wear. He just put on the black turtleneck and the blue jeans and went to work. So he preserved his thinking time for when it mattered most. When he was at Apple headquarters, that's when he did his thinking. If he diluted his limited store of thinking capacity by deciding what to wear in the morning, his impact would have been decreased. Part of the whole reason we have this suite of Apple products is because he made this decision with his wardrobe. So I want you to think about how you can simplify your own decisions and to separate decisions from doing. I find it's helpful to think of yourself both as the boss that decides on the work and the employee that does the work. Unfortunately, this is a very delegation kind of mindset. And as a creative, and you're architects, you're all creative too, it could be more helpful to think about it as a patron and an artisan. And you serve both of these roles. You have an inner patron that decides what work needs to be done. And then you have the artisan, the craftsperson that actually does the work. This is one of those models that you can feel free to screenshot and share up on the hashtag if you like. So here's the most simple productivity tip I can give you. Writing down a goal at the beginning of your day can calibrate every decision you make for the rest of the day. And if you learned only one thing from me today, it's this. Answer this question at the beginning of the day and write it down. There was a study done at Dominican University in California, and Dr. Gail Butler found that writing down your goals increases the likelihood of achieving them by 42%. And if you answer this question at the beginning of your day, what's the most important thing for me to do today? If you get distracted with other priorities, you have a place to return to. You've already done the thinking to decide what the most important thing is so you can get back to it. Now, some goals work better than others. Napoleon Hill said, a goal is a dream with a deadline. We're going to talk a lot today about how to mold your goals into achievements. And a lot of times it depends on how you word your goals. You might have heard of this acronym SMART. Has anybody heard of SMART goals before? Can I see a show of hands? Yeah? Some of you? Yeah, great. So this acronym SMART was developed in a paper in a management review journal in the 80s. And the original author defined a SMART goal as a goal that's specific, measurable, assignable, relevant, and time-bound. And over the years, people have used different words for this acronym. Some people like achievable or realistic or resourced better than the original words. Some people make their goals smarter because they're evaluated or exciting. They're reviewed or recorded. And what I'd like you to do is to go ahead and write down the words that resonate with you. Make yourself an acronym that's either SMART or SMARTER, and use these words to make the acronym that you like. Great. Great. So now you have a framework you can use to interrogate your goals. When you set goals in the future, look back at this list and see if it satisfies all these conditions, or if you need to edit your goals to make them more achievable. Setting goals is helpful, but it's more helpful to review them. Writing down a goal makes it more likely to achieve it, but part of that is because you can review what you've written down. You can come back to it and remind yourself of what your goal is. So don't hide your goals. Place them in a place where you can see them regularly. Now, I don't know about you, but if I put too many goals up of all these things I'm supposed to achieve, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Has anybody ever made a big list that never got done, and every time you see it, you kind of want to hide? Yeah, has that ever happened to you? Yeah. Yeah, it's a natural reaction to not having an efficient system for your productivity. It makes you feel like, oh, I can't do those other things because I'm too busy. Busy is worn as a badge of honor, but it's really not. As Cal Newport says, if you're busy, you're doing something wrong. Your systems are failing you if you're busy. And so we're going to go through some of the ways that you can optimize your activity so that you don't land on the bottom of the ladder. Busy is the bottom of the productivity stages. It is the least productive because there's too much to do. You can't handle it all. If you can do things fast, you can become efficient. Efficient means doing things fast, but it doesn't mean doing the right things. And that's what effective is. The difference between effectiveness and efficiency isn't just your speed. It's your decision on what to work on. The highest level of productivity is leveraged, where the work that you do extends beyond you. And leverage, as you know, is how far you get from the fulcrum. And if the fulcrum is your effort, if you can get leverage so you're far away from it, and even a slight movement has a great effect, that's what leveraged is. And the three systems we're going to go through today can help you ascend these different levels. If you're busy and you want to get efficient, read Getting Things Done. If you're efficient and you want to get effective, read First Things First. If you're effective and you want leverage, read The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Now, each of these systems are going to be helpful for any point on the ladder, but I find that the ones that are the most useful for these specific levels are these systems. And we're going to go through each of these 3 books in turn. And because it's in the name, we're going to start first with First Things First. First Things First was written by Dr. Stephen Covey. And he based this book around the Eisenhower decision-making matrix. And this quadrant system is how Eisenhower prioritized decisions when he was a war general. He would ask 2 questions of any priority. Is it important? And is it urgent? And based on the answer to those 2 questions, it's going to land in one of these 4 quadrants. Something that's important and urgent is something you should do. Something that's important and not urgent is something you should plan when to do. If it's not important and it's urgent, you can delegate that to someone else. And if it's not important and it's not urgent, eliminate it. And when you're busy, when you're overwhelmed, sometimes what you decide not to do is more important than what you decide to do. So here's some examples of all 4 of these quadrants. If things that are important and urgent are an angry client calling you, or a crying baby, or your dog is on fire. These are things you have to take care of right away. Quadrant 2 are things that are important, but they're not urgent. Exercise is important, but you don't have to do it right now. Keeping relationships with your old friends, there's no deadline on that. And you can plan the next 12 months anytime in the year. It's important that you do it, but there's no hard deadline on when it has to be done. Things that in quadrant 3 that are urgent and not important are a lot of meetings. If somebody calls you on the phone and you don't know who they are, that's urgent, but it's not necessarily important. A lot of our phone notifications, they're urgent because they're time bound. They need to be taken care of right now, but a lot of them have 0 importance. Quadrant 4, things that are not important are not urgent are things like paperwork, most of your email, and doom scrolling. Can we just agree now that doom scrolling is not important and not urgent? Eisenhower said most things which are urgent are not important, and most things which are important are not urgent. What's so interesting about this is that means that most of our important priorities land in quadrant 2. They don't have a deadline that pushes us to get them done. But if you do these important non-urgent things, they have a huge impact on the rest of your life. I was in university once and a professor came in with a bucket of rocks and a jar of sand. And he poured the jar of sand into the bucket of rocks and it filled it to the brim. And he said, "What do you notice?" And we said, "Well, you filled it all the way up." And he said, "Yeah, well, what if I did it differently?" And he filtered out the sand and he poured out the rocks and he put the sand in first. And he said, "These are the little tasks, the tiny things you need to get done." And then he put in the small pebbles. And then he put in the bigger rocks. And they didn't fit at the end. It overflowed the bucket. And when he went back and did it again, and he started with the big rocks first, those little pieces of sand, they found places in between all the other priorities. But it was because he started with the big rocks first that he was able to fill the bucket. It's like Mark Twain said, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. Now, he also said, eat a live frog first thing in the morning, and nothing worse will happen to you for the rest of the day. And he also said, if you have to swallow a frog, don't stare at it too long. I don't know what his thing was with frogs and swallowing them, but I mean, his folksy wisdom from the South probably included a good source of protein like frogs. But either way, you want to focus on those big rocks and prioritize those early in your day. Quadrant 2, things like exercise, things that are important but are not urgent. If you get in the habit of starting with quadrant 2 first, you'll be able to fill your bucket. So now we're going to talk about some ways that you can manage your tasks and your time. This is really the work of productivity, is to create a system for planning and recording your tasks and your time. Peter Turla said, a plan is what? A schedule is when. It takes both a plan and a schedule to get things done. Your tasks and your time need to be registered for the future, recorded in the present, and reviewed in the past. If you plan what you're going to do, use a checklist throughout the day so that you can see at a glance what has and hasn't been done. Reviewing that completed checklist at the end of the day is really helpful psychologically because those are all your victories. I've gone through really busy days, and at the end of it, I had no idea what happened. But if I go back and I list everything that I did, that I accomplished, I suddenly find, wow, I did all these things, and it gives me momentum to go into the next day with confidence. Registering your time in advance is usually done by scheduling your time. I'm going to work on this at 9 a.m. and this at 10 a.m. and so forth. And you can analyze your activity if you record it well. You need a process for analyzing your time, because keeping a timesheet should not take you more time than the work itself. So there's some really good time tracking apps you can use. Timely is good. Toggle just has like a quick little button you put in the bar, so you can like literally clock in and clock out. Rescue Time is a really popular time tracking app, and it lets you categorize your time so that you can go back and look at your reports and see, oh, I spent this much time in billable hours and this much time in admin. And that's useful data. because then it lets you know how to prioritize in the future. They analyzed 50,000 of their users and they found that most employees spend an average of 38% of their time on their core skills. Do you know how much time you spend on your core skills? If you want to find out, the best thing that you can do is record your time and make it easy and seamless. So it's literally just the click of a button and you keep it going in the background. Now, personally, I don't use a time tracking app. I use iCal. What I do is I schedule out my week in advance with color-coded blocks. And I say, okay, I'm going to work for an hour on this and 2 hours on that, and I block it out this way. And this was my schedule for last week as it looked on Sunday. And this is how it looked yesterday. As I go through the day, I make small adjustments. Oh, this meeting went 15 minutes over. That call canceled. I decided to work on this project instead. And this is a process you can use to check in with what am I doing and what did I just do continually throughout the day. I have my assistant go through and log all of these in a spreadsheet so that I can see at the end of the week, how much time did I spend in each of these colorful categories? And if I want more results in a specific area, let's say I want to make more money, I need to amplify my sales time and spend more hours in sales. And so I can plan that for next week because I have the data to make that decision. So however you decide to do it, find a system that works for you. As Jim Rohn said, what gets measured gets managed. If you don't measure your time, you can't manage your time. So that's first things first. It's a time management and prioritization system that relies on the Eisenhower decision-making matrix. And now we're going to move on to getting things done. Everything making sense so far? Are we moving too fast? Yeah, good. Okay, great. So Getting Things Done is the book that I read when I was 29 years old. And I'm glad that I did this early in my career because it's had a compounding effect. Not only was I more productive when I was 30, but by the time I was 40, I was so much more productive that it makes me wish I read this book when I was in high school, because the compounding effect is just going to continue accruing. What Getting Things Done helps you do is to capture, clarify, and organize ideas. There are task management components to this system, but it's primarily about ideas. What this system really does for me is it gives me a mechanism so that when I'm in flow and I'm working on something and an idea comes at me that I don't want to lose, I can quickly put that idea into my system and stay in flow without getting distracted. And the reason I can do this is because of an inbox. The inbox is the central component of the Getting Things Done system. Your inbox can be physical or it can be digital, and it's the place where everything goes. Every task you have to do, every idea you have, every phone call you have to make, every receipt you have to save, everything goes in the inbox. So in the moment, you don't have to think about how to process it. You put it in the place where you know you will process it later. When it's in the inbox, there's one of four things you can do with it. You can do it, delegate it, defer it, or delete it. Everything in your inbox can be taken care of with one of these four actions. You do it, delegate it, defer it, or delete it. There's actually a much more complicated system and workflow that they go into in the book. I'm not going to dive into this right now, but this is a really worthwhile rabbit hole if you want to get into it. But we're going to stick with the main concepts. There's the inbox, the 2-minute rule, and what's the next action. If you learn these, you'll have the basics of the Getting Things Done system. The 2-minute rule is simple. If it takes less than 2 minutes, do it right then. That's the 2-minute rule. If it takes less than 2 minutes, do it right then. If you check your mail and you say, oh, this will just take a couple minutes, I'll get to it later, and you do that day after day, eventually you have an hour-long project to take care of. That's another item on your schedule that you have to accommodate. But if you do small tasks right then, because it takes less than 2 minutes, you're continually processing those little grains of sand out of your system so it doesn't gum up the gears. There's an old saying, only handle mail once, which means if you're going to pick up a piece of mail, open it up, put the letter in your inbox or in the recycling bin, or make the phone call, or do whatever you need to handle mail only once. That's the 2-minute rule. If it takes less than 2 minutes, do it right then. What's the next action is a question that you can use to interrogate items on your task list that aren't moving. Mike Rosica podcast, item on my task list, and it sits there day after day, week after week, and I don't do anything with it because the task needs to start with a verb. Call Mike Rosica, schedule podcast interview. Those are actions I can take. And so if you have an item on your task list and it's been sitting there for weeks, ask yourself, what's the next action? And if you can define what that next action is, that's what you need to do to get it moving. Now, this is the sort of thing that you see a lot on the hashtag GTD. If you want to screenshot this and put it up on the YAWS 2021 hashtag, be sure and include the GTD hashtag as well. There's a really vibrant community of getting things done enthusiasts. And if you like this as your rabbit hole, and this is what you want to research, search around on the GTD hashtag, and you'll see all sorts of people hacking this system for their own process. And that GTD process, it's based on 4 topics: the inbox, the 2-minute rule, what's the next action, and the weekly review. The weekly review is the final component that I want to share with you about getting things done. And it's a scheduled time on your calendar where you empty your inbox and read every list. That's what the weekly review is. So if you're just throwing ideas on lists all week long, you can safely do it without getting distracted because you know you're going to read that list at the end of the week. Now, after using this system for more than 10 years, I have a lot of lists. And so I've curated those into the lists that I read during my weekly review, and then the larger list of lists that I read during monthly and quarterly reviews. But either way, having that dedicated time where you can return to your inbox and process all those tasks that have been building up throughout the week is very helpful, because then you can look at everything in your inbox and either do it, delegate it, defer it, or delete it. So that's getting things done in a nutshell. Does this all make sense? Can I see some thumbs up? Everybody who gets it? Great, great. All right, so the hashtag GTD is also going to provide you with a lot of recommendations for GTD apps. A lot of programming nerds are really into productivity, and a lot of them make apps. So there's a huge variety of GTD productivity apps. I personally use Things by Cultured Code. It's Mac only. It's the one I've been using for 10 years. I just happen to like the design and the format the best. Todoist is PC friendly. You can use it in the browser. But I really like this app, Remember the Milk. I mean, the app itself is fine, but the name comes from a story in the book, Getting Things Done by David Allen. And he tells a story and he says, imagine you're in a meeting and it's 10:30 in the morning and you remember you have to pick up milk on the way home. So for the rest of the meeting, you're thinking about the milk. When you go back to your desk, you're telling yourself, I have to remember to pick up milk on the way home. When you go out to lunch, don't forget the milk. The whole rest of the day, that task to remember the milk is sitting there in your brain, taking up space that it shouldn't. And he says, imagine that when you're in that meeting at 10:30 in the morning and you remember you have to get the milk, you take out your phone, you set an alarm for 5:05 and title it, Remember the Milk. You forget about it the rest of the day. And then when you leave the office at 5 p.m., your alarm goes off and you say, I remembered to get the milk. And you go get the milk. David Allen says your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. It's actually a very inefficient use of our brain to hold ideas in the conscious mind. Your conscious mind is like RAM, or read-only memory. And your subconscious mind, which is 90% of your thinking capacity, is like ROM, or read-only memory. Now, as you might know, there's two different types of memory in your computer. There's the big 500 gig hard drive that stores all your files, and there's the small 16 gig memory stick that processes your activity. What the random access memory does is it puts information into those memory sticks and quickly moves it off so that you can move from task to task, from idea to idea, from thing to thing. And if you're using your RAM to store information, the speed at which you can execute is decreased. Your conscious mind should not be holding ideas. It should be empty so that you can have ideas. And that's what these systems do, is they help you store your ideas in a place that's safe enough that you can clear your mind for what's in front of you. So that's the second of our 3 books, Getting Things Done. And now we're going to get into the 4 disciplines of execution. This was written by Sean Covey, who's the son of Dr. Stephen Covey, who was the author of our first book, First Things First. And as the inheritor of the Franklin Covey empire, Franklin Covey sells time management systems and planners, and they do a lot of business consulting. And they work with large corporate clients and management teams on helping them improve their efficiency. So they've had the chance to implement these theories over decades and measure the results. And they have a lot of case studies and a lot of statistics in this book that go through the effectiveness of these 4 disciplines of execution. The first discipline is to focus on the wildly important. The second discipline is to act on the lead measures. The third is to keep a compelling scoreboard. And the fourth is to create a cadence of accountability. So I'm going to go through each one of these in turn. The first discipline, focus on the wildly important, is related to the Pareto principle. Has anybody ever heard of the Pareto principle before? The 80-20 rule? Yeah, a couple of you? Yeah. Vilfredo Pareto was an Italian economist, and he studied a lot of different industries, and he found that in general, about 20% of the effort was responsible for 80% of the results. And the converse was also true, that 80% of the effort only generated 20% of the results. And so people use the Pareto principle to identify that 20% of effort that gives an outsized result. And if you can focus on that 20% of effort, you can magnify your effectiveness. So what they say in the 4 disciplines of execution is that the 80% of effort that only gives you 20% of your results, they call that the whirlwind. It's the daily tasks that are urgent and not necessarily important. It's the stuff you have to do. And they encourage focus on what they call your wildly important goals. And they make this into an acronym, the WIG, the wildly important goals. When you define what your WIG is, then you know where the maximum amount of effort is going to be leveraged. It's that 20% of effort that gets you 80% of the results. Once you know what your wildly important goals are, the second discipline is to act on the lead measures and not the lag measures. The lag measures are the results from the activity that we produce. The lag measures are what we want to achieve, but it's kind of pointless to act on those. If I want to, increase my revenue by 6 figures, I can measure whether or not I did it. But when I look at my activity, the activity that leads to that result is not increase revenue. It's make more sales calls. It's increase prices. When I was selling car insurance, I wanted to make 3 sales a day. That was my goal, to sell 3 policies a day. And I tracked my numbers for the first 6 months. And I found that on average, for every 25 phone calls I made, I sold 1 policy. And I said, well, if those are my numbers, I'll act on the lead measure and I'll make 75 phone calls a day. Statistically, if I make 75 phone calls a day, then I'll get the result of 3 sales a day. So I didn't act on the lag measures. I acted on the activity, the lead measures that led to the results I wanted. Discipline 3 is to keep a compelling scoreboard so that you can look at your lead measures and measure how you're doing today, this week, this month. Scoreboards are effective when you can't ignore them. If you leave a scoreboard in Google Drive and you have to click 5 times and go open a document to go find it, then when you're in the midst of a workday and you're feeling like you don't really want to do the hard work, it's easy to ignore. So making your scoreboard compelling, putting it on your wall behind your desk, putting it on your door, making it your desktop background, putting it in a place where you can't ignore it, keeps you honest about your activity. You need to be able to measure throughout your day how far you are along your goals, because that's going to help you make better decisions in the moment. Oh, I can't go get distracted by that thing. I have to get my numbers up or I'm not going to meet them today. And if I don't meet them today, I won't meet them for the week. So my scoreboard tells me that this is my priority. The 4th discipline of execution is to create a cadence of accountability. This could be accountability to another person or accountability to yourself. Sharing goals with others means that you suddenly get this guilt if you don't achieve it, because you told somebody else you were going to do it. That somebody might be your boss or your business partner or your friend or your dog or a stranger on the street. Just by telling someone your goal, just like writing it down, it makes it more likely you're going to achieve it. Some people use punitive accountability, where they will write a check to a charity they despise and give it to a friend and say, okay, if I don't meet my goal by this date, then send this check in. And knowing that that accountability is out there, that you have to keep that goal or that punitive effect takes place. Sometimes that's enough to keep you on track. I went to a physical theater school when I was younger, and I had a professor who was doing a one-woman show. And she was the director and the only performer, and she wasn't rehearsing. It would get to be 5:30. She was supposed to get to the theater to rehearse at 6, and she would put it off and decide to do something else and skip rehearsals, because who else is she accountable to? So what she did was she went onto Craigslist, which was a new thing at the time when Craigslist was a brand new website. She went onto Craigslist and she found somebody that she could pay to meet her at the theater door at 6 p.m. And that was her job. She showed up at 6 p.m. for rehearsal, and her employee said, "Hi, Joan." Oops. And then left. But just by having somebody that she was accountable to, somebody who she had said that she was going to meet, just by showing up to see if she was there, it kept her accountable enough so that she worked through the difficulty that I don't want to do this. And she created a mechanism so that she had to do it because she didn't want to let down the person that she had employed to give her a high five at the theater door. So that's the 4th discipline of accountability. And I find that accountability, if you're doing it with yourself, is really helpful with reports. I'm a solopreneur. I have a couple of contractors that work with me, but I run my own business, and it's because it's just my practice. I don't have business partners or bosses keeping me honest, but I still do reports. I plan out what I'm going to do, and I review whether or not I did it, because that's what I use to manufacture accountability. If I review my monthly report and I see, oh, I had planned to do this and this and this on the first, and I only did these first two things, then I have the opportunity to get honest with myself. Why didn't those happen? What could I have done better? If you don't track your activity and stay accountable to your goals, you never get that option. You can ignore the hard work, that important and non-urgent work, and that'll decrease your effectiveness over time. So structuring an accountability system is really helpful for making sure you stay productive. There's another technique that helps you stay productive, is the Pomodoro technique. Has anybody ever heard of the Pomodoro technique? Yeah? Yeah. Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. And these tomato timers they're like kitchen timers in Europe. They're the common timer. I had never seen them living in the States, but now that I'm here in New Zealand, I see them all the time in the grocery store. And these timers you can set for 25 minutes, and the Pomodoro is the length of time that you work. You stay on for 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. And there's some science behind why this works, and we'll get into it a little bit without getting too deep in the weeds. They've done a lot of studies on the Pomodoro technique, and they see that when you have 25 minutes on and 5 minutes off, it increases your production at the end of the day. And they can statistically prove that this on-off switch makes you more productive. There's some studies around the ultradian rhythm that some people use, where you're 90 minutes on and you're 20 minutes off. There's a German company called Draugium, and they did all these different variations, and they found that 52 minutes on with 17 minutes off was the best for optimum productivity. But whatever you like to do, you need to change your state from stress to relaxation. You can't catch a wave if you're stressed the entire time on your surfboard, but you also can't catch a wave if you stay relaxed without getting any stress. It takes patience to surf. You need to rest and relax, but then the moment the right wave comes along, you need to burst into activity. And that alternation helps you stay on the right side of this curve. This is called Yerkes-Dodson's law. And what they found is that there's a point of optimal arousal. Beyond this point, you get too stressed and too anxious to perform well. And so the work of productivity is to get yourself to the point of optimal arousal and then take a break, because that break will recharge you and rejuvenate you so that you can come back to the next phase of work refreshed and come back up this curve. Work that we do in a state of stress helps us stay fast, but we need to alternate that with periods of slowness so that we can go between anxiety and flow. One of the best ways to define this difference is deep work and shallow work. And these are both types of work that we need to do throughout the day. Deep work, as defined by Cal Newport, the author of the book of the same name, is professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive abilities to the limit. Shallow work is non-cognitively demanding, logistical style tasks, often performed while distracted. Knowing when to do each of these types of work is essential. When you're doing deep work, you can decide on the work that you're going to do. You can focus on doing your best work, and the goals that you're working on are your goals. Shallow work is for other people's goals. for answering emails, for taking phone calls, for responding to other people. And we see this a lot with office hours. You can get open access to extremely credentialed professors if you show up during open office hours, because they're available to distraction. But if you knock on their door at any other point in the week while they're in the middle of working on a dissertation or a research paper, they're going to tell you to get lost because they're preserving the time for their deep work. Carl Jung, the famed psychotherapist, worked 2 days a week in his client practice in Zurich, Switzerland. And he had another 2 days a week that he spent in a mountain retreat. He had this mountain lodge, and there was a stone tower that had this one-room office at the bottom. And that's where he did his deep work. He was going up against Sigmund Freud and challenging his foundational ideas of psychotherapy. And to do work like that, you really need a distraction-free, focused environment. He couldn't do that in Zurich in between working with clients. He needed to preserve time for his deep work. But the only way he could functionally do it is by also allowing time for shallow work. Shallow work is when you can be interrupted, when you're available for people to interrupt you. And if you provide those clear times when people can interrupt you, then you earn the right to protect your deep work time. If you're interrupted in the middle of deep work, you're going to be frustrated. But you can do your best work if you're focused when it's deep work time. Now, if you happen to be available for shallow work and nobody shows up to interrupt you and you have focus time, you can get to that magical land known as inbox zero. That's the worst case scenario to dividing up your time like this. I work from home, and I've worked from home for 10 years, and my wife is a stay-at-home mom, and so she works too. She takes care of the kids and keeps everybody fed, and my family knows when I'm in my studio that I can't be interrupted because I'm talking with you, because I'm doing deep work. But every once in a while, my wife needs time to do deep work. She's got to make a phone call or take an appointment or do something where she needs distraction-free time. And so I take my laptop out to the kitchen table. And my kids know if they need anything during that time, if they're hungry or if they want some help with Minecraft or whatever, I'm available to interruption. And I only do shallow work at the kitchen table. I would just get frustrated if I tried to do deep work there. But by delineating when my shallow work time is, then everyone else respects the boundaries of when my deep work time is. A couple of final tips for you today. Don't be the bottleneck. If you're working on a team and somebody's waiting for you, play hot potato. Get it off your desk as soon as possible. If you are the dependency, make it urgent. According to a survey by Panopto, we spend an average of 5 hours a week waiting for information. And if you can move this along faster by saying, oh, somebody else is waiting on this, I'm just going to get it done and get it out, then you increase the speed and efficiency of the entire team. So anytime somebody's waiting on you, don't be the bottleneck. Keep everything in flow. And the final tip I want to give you is that punctuality creates trust. Showing up on time, it matters. And I've always been punctual because I was raised in the theater and I was an actor when I was younger. And so showing up on time to rehearsal, it was drilled into us by our directors because the whole rest of the production would wait for you if you were late. So most professional theater people, they're very punctual. What I found so interesting is when I came into being an entrepreneur and I started doing marketing work, and that's a lot of what I do, is I set up learning management systems and systems for lead generation. Well, I did some market research last year and I asked all of my old clients, why did you do business with me? What was the thing that made me stand out from everybody else? What did you really value? And it wasn't my creativity. It wasn't my charming smile. Time and again, what everybody said that they valued the most in working with me was that I was punctual, that I showed up when I said I would, that I had integrity. And when I said, I'm going to do this for you, it was done. Apparently, in the freelancing world, this is a rare thing. And a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're hiring contractors, there's a lot of friction with people who are not punctual. So this one final piece of advice I want to give you is be as punctual as you can, and it will serve you throughout your entire career. So there's one other thing I want to tell you about. We're doing a lot of work on Zoom and meeting people in the grid. And so I know that Zoom fatigue is a big thing. Some of you might be feeling Zoom fatigue right now. And I find that play is the antidote to Zoom fatigue. So I'm hosting some free play and networking sessions on Zoom. You can go to zoombistro.com, and this is what we do for an hour. We play some fun games, and I show people how to moderate these games for other people in their own Zoom meetings. We network with other professionals in breakout rooms, and there's open Q&A about using Zoom better. One of the things that I do is I train professional speakers on how to use Zoom better and how to facilitate interactivity. And so I'm just making myself available. If you want to know how to do that thing that you saw somebody do in Zoom, how to launch a breakout room or a poll or any technical questions, I'm just going to make myself open for that. And so if you want to go to zoombistro.com and register to see me there, it would be great to see you there. And the last thing that I want to offer to you is the slides. So I'm going to put a link here in chat. You can fill out this survey anonymously if you like, and just tell me how I did today. I'd love to hear your feedback on what this presentation was like, and I'll send you the slides. So if you want to go back through any of the things that we've discussed, you can do it in there. So I know we've ended a few minutes early. I think this gives us some time for Q&A, but thanks so much, everybody, for spending this time with me today.
Thank you, Kaylin. This is awesome. I loved it. Lots of gems, man. This is a action-packed presentation. All right, team. Let's take a couple of quick questions. Let's use the raise your hand function. I think it's under reactions in the Zoom software. Let me call on Sarah Vignettes first.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Kaylin. That was amazing. A lot of information to take in, extremely informative, extremely helpful. I definitely need to set my priorities straight. And this is definitely the best starting point for someone who seems completely overwhelmed in not helpful tasks. But thank you so much. I had a question regarding the schedule that you posted, talking about how you plan things ahead of time and how you had like a very color-coded, thorough schedule laid out. And actually with the boot camp, there was a similar setup to, you know, time tracking and how to get things done. But anyways, the point was I have trouble setting things in advance because I don't know how to word this right, but how do you actually go about completing those tasks? Like, for instance, I would create one of those and say every hour I'm going to start doing these. And when it gets to that day and that time, I have other things to do, or I forget to look at that list. And before you know it, 3 days go by and I never even opened the calendar and I had no idea what was going on. So how do you mentally shift the transition to like, I need to stop doing what I said I was going to do and start this at 10 p.m. because I feel like every day is completely different and things end up prioritizing, you know, on a whim sometimes. So I don't feel like that's successful for me, but I would like to know your take on how that shift, and maybe it could be, I don't know.
Yeah, great question, Sarah. I think what might be helpful is to distinguish between categories and tasks. And what I schedule in my calendar is a category. I'm going to work on sales. I'm going to do email copywriting. I'm going to do this thing. And it's a broad category that I set aside time for it. And when I get to that time, I go to my task manager, which is separate. And I look at the task manager and say, what are the things in this list? I have a list for pipeline and a list for email copywriting and a list for web design for that client. And when I get to the color, I'm working on this client now, I come and I look at the list and I work on those tasks. So it helps, like, it's a little like horse blinders, you know? Instead of all these other things I could do, when I get to this section of my calendar, I'm only going to allow myself to work on tasks that fall in this category. And then I process those tasks and work on the checklist that belong to that category. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. So definitely just a category, and within that category, you have a task list within those. And as long as that gets done within that block, that seems a lot more manageable than actually like doing one task at a time and not having enough time. So thank you so much for that.
You bet.
All right, I'm gonna call on Big Al's iPad.
Hi, Big Al.
Hi, Alex is the name. Sorry, I tried changing the name. Thank you, Kaylin, for your presentation. I just wanted to ask, I seem to have struggles with figuring out what my tasks actually are half the time. What I can kind of pick up from it is maybe it comes with a little bit of experience. And sometimes I don't realize that I know my tasks that I'm doing, and sometimes I do. And I guess what's your thought on that concept of like, is it an experience thing?
It is. It comes easier with time. And I think that question from getting things done, what's the next action? It's really helpful to clarify what is a task, because you can have a vague project and sort of know, and when you get into it and get in flow, you just sort of do the things that you need to. But planning that project and delineating the tasks, that comes with practice. And so I'd say practice with a project that you know really well. You know backwards and forwards how to change a tire or whatever. And you pick some project and just make a checklist. What is everything that I would have to do for this project? And interrogate the items on your list by asking, what's the next action? And are these SMART goals? Use those two tools to look at your list. And I think that'll help clarify things.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, any last questions for Kaylin while we got him here? Raise your hand, hurry up. Oh, here we go. Let's call in Zara. What's up, Zara?
Hi, Zara.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Kaylin. This was very, very helpful. I think it's a great reminders and also great ideas to implement. One of the things about studying for the ARE and being with Michael is, you go to work, you're doing all these tasks all day long, you're trying to be organized, staying on time, getting some bottlenecks, as you said, and feeling frustrated. And then you get home and you need to study for exams or do other things that we need to do. And as parents, as mother, it's tough sometimes to find that time to do more things than just the day-to-day activity and put your time in, and I'm sure a lot of people, it's happening with them with working from home and having children. Not to feel guilty, not to, because I think that guilt also add on to the frustration of getting things done. So what are your thoughts regarding that?
I think prioritization is really helpful, and identifying what's important and what's urgent and what's not. Because that guilt comes from a sense that there are important things that we're not getting to. But if you can identify things that you are getting to that aren't important, that are not important, you can put those off. You can defer those to a later time. You can decide not to do them, or at least not to do them until the more important things are done. When I make task lists, personally, I don't really like doing them by hand, even though I take notes by hand quite a bit. Whenever I do my task lists, for me, they are always drag and drop. Because I need to be able to prioritize in the moment and say, well, I know I have these 6 things left to do, but actually this one needs to be up at the top. And so for me, I'm constantly reprioritizing based on what I think in the moment is important and urgent. But if you have things that are taking up time that are not important, I think that could be the source of the guilt, that you're not getting to things that deep down actually are more important and they're not getting done. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I mean, at times it feels easy to do and reprioritize, but at other times it feels like it's really hard to do, especially when kids know when to push buttons.
Yeah.
They know when you tell them, I don't want to be interrupted, that's actually when you get interrupted 10 times. So I think that's just
yes, if they are not getting what they need. If they are full, if they've gotten everything they need from you and they feel complete, then when you ask for time alone, they're more likely to respect it because they're not feeling any lack. And so maybe have a conversation with your kids about, I don't know, maybe if they're old enough to have this conversation, what is it that you need to honor the space that I need for focus? And have that conversation with them, because they might reveal, oh, well, I need, 15 minutes playing a board game with you in the morning, or something that you totally don't expect. And then when you give them what they need, then they're going to be more likely to respect and honor your space.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Kaylin, thank you for doing this today. Fantastic
Thank you, Mike.
presentation. Yeah, we loved it. The chat went crazy.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It was great spending this time with you today. I had a really good time. So I appreciate you spending all this time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you. All right, team, we're going to wrap this. We're going to close this one out, and I will see you guys in an hour. We're going to do a mental health panel. Michael LaValle, he's invited a bunch of guests to talk about mental health and architecture. So I'll see you guys later. Thanks again, Kaylin. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Have fun out there.